Welcome to Million Voices. Over 30 million born-again evangelicals do not vote. Many of them do not pray or get involved in politics in any way. And our heart is to change that and wake up the church and get the church back using her voice to try to transform this culture for good. And today, our topic is religious freedom on one of our 10 guiding truths. And our guest is a dear friend of mine, somebody I have immense respect for and have for decades, Kelly Shackelford. Kelly runs First Liberty, which is the largest religious liberty-focused law firm in the country. He's done some huge cases in the Supreme Court. We're going to talk about some of those today. Kelly, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, John.
I want to kick it off. There's a small little thing that's happened here with the Supreme Court just recently, and that's going to be a bit discussed here over the coming weeks and even going forward. So I want you to speak to that. Is the big debate is, there's not enough time. Should you wait? Should you not? Could you speak into that issue for our viewers?
Yeah. What's going on is actually what's always going on in the history of the country. Whenever a seat opens up during an election year at the Supreme Court, the job of the president, and therefore every president has always done this, is to nominate someone to the Supreme Court. And that's what President Trump has done. That to make it like there's something unusual or something untoward about what he's doing is just a false narrative. The other thing that's probably not surprising to people is when you have a president of one party that nominates someone in an election year for the Supreme Court spot that opened, if that president is of a different party than the Senate, the person almost never gets confirmed.
Are you suggesting that the two-party system, they don't always get along and work together over controversial issues, Kelly?
They don't. And what exactly happened 4 years ago with Merrick Garland is what happens, which is the one party says, I think we'll wait until after the election and see if there's still this differentiation. When they're the same party, the Senate and the president, they almost always confirm. It's happened over and over again in the history of our country. So the point is, what's going on now is exactly what has always gone on. It's what the Constitution contemplates. It's why it lets the president nominate and the Senate advise and consent. So there's two parts to the process. And when you have the same party, guess what? They take care of it. If you don't have the same party, then that's a whole different story. And so I just point out what's going on is exactly what's always going on. And the timing of this, they say, oh, it's too fast. No, it's not.
Ginsburg herself was done in 42 days, right?
42 days. Connor was 33 days. Stevens was like 16 days. And again, in
19 days, John Paul Stevens,
In this case, you've got a nominee that has recently been through all this. I mean, everybody probably remembers she went through a confirmation hearing. They looked at everything regarding her. They got the comments against her because of her faith. Your dogma lives loudly within you. And it's like, I'm concerned about that. I mean, everybody knows. So it's not like this is new. This should be easy to move quickly. And I think she will move quickly, although I don't want to ever predict the shenanigans that are recently applied to those who get on the court.
Yeah, I know. And I want to talk to you about two related things to that. One is what you just said. Feinstein basically said the dogma lives loudly, speaking specifically about her religion. Well, if you read your writings, you seem to have a Catholic faith, and that dogma seems to live loudly inside of you. So, people are talking about Obamacare. They're talking about the life issue, Roe versus Wade. But fundamentally, if we lose our religious freedom and a justice is now disqualified, which almost all of them have been Judeo-Christian for hundreds of years, if that's now the litmus test, it's almost like that's the foundational piece, or what a lot of people call the first liberty. Can you speak to how damaging that litmus test would be that the left seems to now be coming up with?
Well, look, the whole idea of questioning people to be judges about their religion number one, it's incredibly unseemly. And I think most Americans find it disgusting. has nothing to do with whether you'll be a good judge. You know, we can find religious people that are horrible judges, and we can find secular people that are horrible judges.
That's right. That's right.
And look, this is not, you know, we're not the first people to think of this or to have people engage in this type of ugly conduct. The founders put this in our Constitution. Look at Article 6 of our Constitution. It says there shall be no religious test for any of the federal offices. This is a violation of the law. The founders knew that this might be a temptation, and they totally disagreed with this. And, you know, in addition to the fact that it's bad and it leads to section, you know, one denomination fighting another denomination and all this kind of stuff, it's also kind of obviously, it's a way to make sure you don't get the best person, you know?
And she's preeminently qualified. #1 in her class at Notre Dame, voted one of the best law professors. I mean, clearly the lady is incredibly qualified, and it's almost, we've done several things on here with black conservatives, how they almost face a double discrimination for, they kind of have some residual discrimination from some whites because of the color of their skin. But if they're conservative, the discrimination is, wait, conservative women are almost to that same level now. And it's almost like, well, we're for women as long as they're far leftist in their ideology. And so what's troubling to me is this woman is eminently qualified, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Let me ask you another kind of related question. First debate, as ugly as everybody agrees that was on every side, Biden was asked a question. He would not answer the question over and over and over. Will you stack the courts? Are you going to, oh, we don't need to play that game. We don't need to play, which was kind of signaling, of course. And all they have to do, if the Democrats take over the you know, Senate, House, and the White House, they can do that. Speak to our viewers. How troubling would that trend be? Because then it would be, if they add several to swing it one way, then the other party's going to do the same thing. And where does that take us?
I really hope that you know, Vice President Biden will answer that question, because that's a very important question. I hope he will answer it by saying, because he said before in the past that he was against court packing. Justice Ginsburg herself was asked this within the last year. She said it's a horrible idea. She's right. If you pack the court, what that means is the Democrats come in, they destroy the filibuster, #1, which they would have to do. And then they just change that. We've had 9 justices as the number for over 150 years. If you now say, no, we're going to add 2 more so that we can get a majority our way, what you are doing is you're making a decision to destroy the Supreme Court, because, you know, 4 years later, if another party comes in, they'll just add 2 or however many they need to add. And the court is now a political body. It's no longer an independent judicial body. And you're making a decision because you're frustrated with how the court is. You're making a decision to destroy the United States Supreme Court. It's a horrible, which, by the way, when the last time it was tried by, you know, a president who
FDR.
had, both the Senate and the House back behind him, didn't work. The people reacted that this is a horrible idea. It was very harmful to him politically. Even having having one party in control of everything, couldn't get it through. And I would hope that would happen again, because it would be very damaging to our country.
Yeah, I agree. And so there's these lists. President Trump kind of broke the mold and came out with a list in 2016, and he came out with a list of 20 additional justices. And ironically, I mean, it looks bizarre, but it was the week before Ginsburg passed away. The Wall Street Journal says that you or your organization was one of the groups that came up with that list. I don't know if you want to speak to that or not, but what do you think about that list? Was that a list as solid as the first list, or what? Was there any difference in it? Speak to us about that list of 20 that came out.
That list is the most solid list we've seen. Obviously, the president, when he was running as a candidate, he came up with a list the first time. You know, if I were to look at that list, I'd say there's some good people on there, and there's some people that I thought were better. And but the second list, the list that he just came out with of 20, it's all solid. These are people, what's happened, John, is for years, as conservatives and as people who believe in sort of biblical principles, we've watched this sort of game go on the Republican side. They pick a sort of a DC attorney type who, they're an originalist. They're a real conservative on, look at them. Look at on this fiscal issue here, and look at on the government regulation issue. Look how they write as an originalist. And because of that, you can know that they'll continue to be an originalist on any of these controversial cultural issues. And it doesn't seem to pan out that way, right? And it's kind of,
it doesn't.
It's kind of like saying, hey, look, this guy can lift this 5-pound dumbbell really well, so I bet he can lift the 80-pound dumbbell. And
that's a good analogy. I've never heard that before.
Our philosophy is the opposite. You know what? If they can lift the 80-pound dumbbell, they could probably lift the 5-pound dumbbell. So what we've said from now on is people who go on these lists needs to have proof, vision, something where they've shown that they will be a consistent originalist on the cultural side versus the other side, because if they have the courage to do the right thing when the pressure's on and people are criticizing them, if they say, no, we go to the original meaning of the text, what the Constitution says, then despite the backlash, despite the pressure, now you've got a judge who's going to be consistent across the board, and being a judge and not a politician, which is what unfortunately the other side wants of our judges.
Yeah, it's a troubling trend. What bothers me in law school, my constitutional law professor had been the chief clerk for Rehnquist for several cycles, and he was hired by another government to rewrite their constitution. He picked out 12 of us, and one of the assignments we had to study the history of the world constitutions, and I had the Soviet Union. And it was stunning to me that they had more in their Bill of Rights, more free speech, more free press, more free everything, but they weren't free. Mm-hmm. And what they did not have were two huge things that I had never paid attention to, because everyone talks about, the freedom of speech and religion and those things. They didn't have federalism, and they did not have separation of powers. And what troubles me the most is that's why this country works, is I think it was Madison, I can't remember now, who said that if men were angels, we wouldn't need government. But because they're not angels, we want one to make the law, one to enforce the law, and one to interpret the law, so they can be a balance and check on each other. Well, now we've gotten a two-party dysfunctional congressional system where presidents are doing more and more executive orders. If we take away the judiciary and make it a political body, there's really just one branch of government left, and we're headed in a bad way. So I want to talk to you about, to me, a couple of the most pivotal cases. Now I was looking at a list here of kind of some of the ones that stood out to me. Protecting Orthodox Jews to meet in their home to worship, defending a football coach who prayed and got in trouble for it, representing a Marine, a female who refused to remove a Bible verse from her desk. But the two I want to talk about are the Bladensburg, where they cut the two arms of the cross off, because that changed decades of constitutional interpretation. I want to ask you about that one first, and then a case in Mississippi dealing with COVID. So tell our viewers why Bladensburg was such a pivotal case.
The official name of the case is the American Legion versus the American Humanist Association. It's a landmark case. The reason is the Establishment Clause says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Why did the founders put that in there? They didn't want there to be an established national church that then everybody had to support, which then would reduce their religious freedom. But 50 years ago, when you had the liberal Warren Court in place, they said, no, it means more than that. And they added to the Constitution. They said it means separation of church and state. It means that offended observers can now bring lawsuits. So again, you can't bring lawsuits because you're offended in any area of the law, except if you're offended by religion. And so our whole lives.
And usually it's just one religion that you're offended by.
That's right. Or two, maybe Judeo-Christian, right? And so what's happened our whole lives, we've seen attacks on nativity scenes, Ten Commandments monuments, menorahs, any sort of religious displays in public. And the founders would be going, what? There's nothing wrong with religion in public, but it's this case that has caused this hostility to religion from the government, and it's been there for 50 years. So we got the Bladensburg Cross case, which is a a memorial that was put up almost 100 years ago by mothers who lost their sons in World War One. We got up to the Court of Appeals. The judge on the Court of Appeals said, why don't we just cut the arms off this cross? Because that way nobody will be offended and we won't have to tear it down. And so we realized at that point, I think we're going to have to appeal this one to the Supreme Court.
And hope they take it.
That's right. And we did, and they took it. And we could have gone for the win, protect this memorial. But we realize now, because we looked at Kavanaugh, we looked at Gorsuch, we knew where they were on religious freedom. We thought, I think we might have 5 votes to finally get rid of this precedent that's 50 years, Lemon, and we won the case 7-2. But more importantly, I think we won on Lemon 5-4. 5 of the justices said, it's a bad case. We're not following it. And people don't know this, but we just had a sea change in religious freedom. It's like for 50 years, we've been going this one direction of hostility to religion. We just turned. We are now going the other direction. Now we have to build that out of what that looks like, but everything just changed. And we're watching lower court decisions one after another right now being changed as those courts follow that Supreme Court precedent, whether it's Lehigh, Pennsylvania, which was told they were going to have to take down their city seal because it had a cross on their city seal for, over 200 years. That's now been reversed and said, no, not after the American Legion case. After that case in the Bladensburg Cross, there's nothing wrong with having a cross on your city seal. There's nothing wrong with the religious heritage and history that we find everywhere throughout our country.
Wow.
That hostility is over, and it's just the beginning. We're just at the beginning of some incredible strides on religious liberty that go back to the judges we're putting on the courts and whether they want to follow the original meaning of the text or whether they want to go with what they feel is right, or more hip or modern. And
right.
Big change.
How do you see that playing out? What are a couple examples you can tell the viewers now that 40, 50 years of bad law has been corrected to get back to the Constitution? How do you see that playing out practically in people's lives?
Well, I see it in a lot of ways. I can give you one example and then one kind of implication to those who are believers that really care about the ability to share the truth. One would be, I just love this case because it's so, I think, such a picture. In South Carolina, we had a city that put up a monument to police officers. It had a police officer's prayer on the monument, and it mentioned God like 3 times. Somebody complained, and they went and they scrubbed God off of the monument those 3 times. People in the community were furious. They all came to the city council. They said, how dare you? And so what do? They just took the monument down. They didn't know what to do. Yeah. And so somebody reached out to us. We contacted the city. We said, haven't you read the American Legion decision at the Supreme Court? And they said, no. And so they read it. Yeah. Well, guess what they did? They put the monument back out with God on it because there's nothing wrong with having that out there. And that is, to me, what's happened is everything has changed. It's just most people don't know it.
That's right.
As they learn, things are going to change. I think our culture is going to change. And so, when people aren't scared right now, if you go in public and people see something religious, they almost cringe a little bit and go, is this okay? Is this okay? Mm-hmm. That culture is going to change. And I think the result of that is people are going to be much more open to hearing the truth and to hearing things about faith, which is a great thing for our country. So just the beginning of something I think is going to be really great for our country. And we still have, now it's like, how do you carry that not only into the monuments and public arena, but what about the public schools? What about your business? You can see how these same principles can be brought to protect religious liberty in all these other areas of our society. We're going to have to battle those out in the coming years.
I kind of think you're going to be a very, very busy guy, Kelly.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
With one victory sometimes creates, enormous responsibilities, but I see you have fun doing it. You're really good. You're really gifted. I want to talk to you about one more thing because we have to go. I know your time is critical. Thank you for giving us some today. And then I want you to speak to our viewers about the importance of civic involvement. One of the cases that I looked up was a Mississippi case. And this is where, with this whole battle that's raging over COVID, and for me, it was quite shocking how people just gave up their liberties. They just gave up their constitutional right out of fear. you know, the government said, well, you know, church is not essential, and 6 feet and 10 people or 5 people, or, you know, you can go riot or go to a bar or, you know, do something like, or a sports event, but church is still not essential in a lot of places. And so one of the cases you took was a black church in Mississippi, and they were just worshiping in their cars. Yes. And got surrounded by police officers like they're some dangerous criminals because they were worshiping God. Talk to us about that case and what happened there.
This is a small church in Greenville, Mississippi. And what happened is, you know, during COVID, I mean, some of the more, the larger churches and more, you know, affluent people, you know, they don't even think about the aspect of whether people have a streaming service or whether they're older and know how to use the internet or Facebook Live or any of that. This church had an issue because a lot of their people didn't have that. They had elderly people and others who, they couldn't do a sermon over the internet. So what the pastor did is he said, just come to the church parking lot. You can be in your car, just barely roll down your window. And he's got a loud voice and he preached. And
you didn't even need a microphone?
Didn't need a microphone, no.
That's awesome.
And you know, it's a small church. There were probably 6 cars there. This was a Thursday night. They were surrounded by 8 squad cars. So 6 cars at the church. So here's the thing that's so odd. It was a crime to meet in your car in the church parking lot. Right down the street, there's a Walmart where everybody's getting in and out of their cars or walking. I mean, they're staying in their car. So it's like, it's against the law. It's okay under the law to have your car in the Walmart parking lot, but it's only illegal if it's in the church parking lot. And so what happened is, and this is the crazy thing, John, is the police officers show up, and this is all on camera. And this white Mississippi police officer looks at the African-American pastor and says, your rights have been suspended. I mean, he says this on film, and we're sitting there. I mean, you shake your head and you're like, he didn't just say that, did he? It's like, no, your rights aren't suspended in the United States of America.
Unbelievable.
Black or because you're religious. The Constitution trumps whatever you think the law is. And that was one of the first cases in the history of our country during the pandemic. And we were in federal court very quickly, and it was a pretty resounding victory. But I think it's a message to people that your freedoms, there are people who will take away your freedoms in a second if you're not willing to stand for them. And if we don't have churches and pastors and people of faith willing to stand for these freedoms that our forefathers put in place, they will be gone. And we have to be faithful, good stewards of what God has given us. And that includes the elections, as you talk about.
Yeah.
Be good stewards of the elections as well.
Yeah, talk to our viewers about that, because that is, you know, the number one reason people don't vote is they think my vote doesn't matter. You know, number 2 is I'm too busy, and number 3 is I'm tired of holding my nose and voting for the lesser 2 evils. In 2016, I'll never forget, I was speaking at a pastors conference in Florida, and I had probably 500 or 700 pastors there, and the polls had just come out. Hillary and Trump were the most unpopular Republican and unpopular Democrat in the history of polling. And one of the things I felt like God showed me was to tell these pastors, it's not about this election. It's not even about that person. Your hope is not in that person. It's all the decisions that they're going to make. And Scalia, you know, was being replaced. And that was a big, big battle. And there were a lot of evangelicals that were not excited about President Trump. I'll never forget, I asked them, how many of you have been a pastor for over 4 years? How many of you been for over 8 years? And the majority of these pastors in this room had. And I said, this next month is not about the President of the United States. That's not what you're voting for. And they kind of just looked at me like, are you dumb? Of course it's what we're voting for. It's a presidential election. I said, you're voting for the next 6 presidential terms, because the average tenure of a Supreme Court of the United States is 24 years. And the room gasped. And it was almost like sometimes it's not about the person, the personality, or the party. It's about what is at stake here from a policy principle standpoint. So can you speak to the viewers as a believer how do you overcome these obstacles of you're busy? Does it really matter? How would you speak to our viewers on that, Kelly?
There's a lot of answers. Let me start with the first one, which kind of nails it, which is if you're a Christian and you don't vote, you're sinning. I mean, it's just that simple. If God gives you the ability to do something to make a difference for good and you refuse to do it, that's wrong. And look, if you don't fill that void with the truth that you have, then people will fill the void with something that's very different. And so if you look at countries that lose religious freedom and lose these things, the follow-up to that is not that there's less religion. The follow-up to that is that all freedom gets taken away and incredible evil comes into place. So we have a duty, first as Christians, to represent Christ in every area of society where he gives us that opportunity. And every pastor, oops, sorry about the light going off here. Every pastor has a responsibility to equip the saints to represent Christ in every area of society. So, I mean, that's what, Ephesians 4, that's the job of the pastor, right? Equip the saints for works of service in all of these different areas of society. That's what we're supposed to do. And I mean, God gave, when you think about the freedoms, incredible blessings we have in this country, we didn't earn them. I mean, other people died for these things. God gave them to us. We need to be good stewards for our children and our grandchildren. And what that means is when we're looking at elections, guess what? You're always picking between the lesser of two evils, because unless Jesus is on the ballot, they're both sinners. And they both got, the more you know about them, the more sin you find out, just like all of us, right? We're all sinners. Yeah. So I think what you have to ask is, what will they do? Okay, because what they do is much more important than what they say, or whether they're if I looked at David and thought, I'm not electing that guy, he's a sinner. But if I knew what he was going to do, then I'd like David in a lot of ways, right? And so we just got to do the best we can with what they say they're going to do, what we think that they will. The reason you really look to character or how much is whether you can trust that they say what they're going to do is what they do. But if you can see it over lifetimes and over long periods, and I think we kind of have that this election, right? You've got Biden, who's been 47 years there. You've got Trump, which has a term. I think if you look at what they say they will do and you see what they've done, it's pretty clear, very different between the two as to what they will do on all these different issues. So I would say put the other stuff aside and go to, what will these things do for the issues that God says are important to me for the future of the country? And just vote your conscience. Try to say, Lord, I need your help. I want to represent Christ, and follow into the voting booth. But don't not vote, because we've got to have people that know the truth. Be good stewards and represent Christ. We can't afford to not have Christians involved, or else our country will change into something that we don't recognize.
Well said. One of the ways I feel like God showed it to me is anything that the church withdraws from, the darkness comes in. And even when your motion light went out, I thought it was hilarious, because it's almost like there's darkness that comes in, and the answer is us getting back into it was, I know you didn't plan it, but it was almost to me a visual picture of if the church stays home. And the whole thing that started this was George Barna's numbers of 39 million born again evangelicals didn't show up and vote. And there's a lot of people of faith beyond that don't show up and vote. And I think they're starting to wake up, and it's the sacrifice of people who are willing to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Can you imagine, World War II, people going, it's kind of messy to go to Germany and help Jews, and it's kind of messy to go fight Hitler. I might break a fingernail or get shot at, could you imagine what the world would be like if people didn't do that? And so I appreciate you. I've the first conversation I had with you, I found you when I got out of law school over 25 years ago and reached out to you, and you have been faithful doing this work, Kelly. I have seen God use you. And you're an inspiration to me and to many, many people who are staying the course, who maintain your integrity, who are doing the right thing in difficult days and in good days. And I just want to tell you from all our viewers and our staff, we're very grateful for you. We really, really are, Kelly. And so I want to just pray for you. And then I want to say goodbye to our listeners. God, I pray that you would bless Kelly. I pray that you'd bless his marriage, bless his family, bless his finances, bless his ministry, bless the work of his hands. You've used him like a Joseph and a Daniel and an Esther and a Moses. God, all these great saints in the past that you used to influence the culture for the good of your people, God, that you would just continue to use him. Thank you. God, the powerful ways you've already used him and you continue to use him. God, you have seasoned him his whole life for this season. We just speak a blessing over him in the name of Jesus. Thank you for joining us, Kelly. And all of you who are listening, thank you for joining us. This is under the tag of religious freedom. Please share this. We're going to give different snippets of this. We're going to give the whole podcast, audio, video. Please share this with your friends because you can be the ones to make a difference. Thank you and God bless.